They reacted quickly, picked up their bikes, and escaped through the street. The ice cream truck's music chased down the big kids club through the street. Cindy was the leader of the pack now, and she directed their destination to the public eye. Donald had a hard time keeping up with the pack, so he took a shortcut through someone's lawn and ditched his friends. Earl was right behind Cindy, Frank, and Nate. Nate was about to slow down from being tired. He did, and introduced himself to a car's back windshield. The ice cream truck bashed Nate's bike, and he flew through into the glass barrier. He had small pieces of glass shards sticking out of his face. He soon died. Welcome all to another Too Scared to Sleep. So sit back, relax, and don't be too scared to sleep. In the small town of Beth, there were very many bubbly, although slightly mischievous children. Although they all pulled various pranks on the other townspeople, they were well liked throughout the town. Despite their popularity, their parents were beginning to take note of their failing grades. "That teacher is terrible," they complained to the preacher, who owned the church that functioned as a schoolhouse. "Look, I'm trying my hardest. I even put the word out for the position in New York City, and a woman by the name of Miss Nada is on her way," he replied. The parents were very eager for Mrs. Nada's arrival. When she finally stepped off the train, the entire town greeted her with baked goods and cards they had their children make. She was very well spoken and polite. The parents did not doubt that she would make a very good teacher. In no time, the children's grades had escalated to straight A's, and their demeanor had become more refined. At first, the townspeople were exuberant about their kids' new behavior. Eventually, they began to worry about their kids, because even though they never pulled pranks, their actions became rather nefarious. They became extremely disrespectful to their parents and other townspeople, and a few townspeople suspected Miss Nada was responsible for the children's corrupted new personalities. The town's notorious ne'er-do-well Samuel made claims that Miss Nada worshipped Satan and was driving kids to hell. Samuel strongly believed that there was something way off about Miss Nada, and even threatened to burn her alive like the witch she was, but no one paid mind to him because he was such a reclusive drunk. The children were ruder and more aggressive when the winter ended. They began getting into fistfights and vandalizing town stores. The preacher began receiving more and more complaints from parents, demanding Miss Nada's to be fired. He vehemently argued that in the time it would take him to find a replacement, the school year would be over, and they had no proof to their argument except superstition. March was drawing to a close when his wife burst through his office door to alert him the schoolhouse was on fire. "Come quick," she shouted. "Samuel's done it. He's really done it. The schoolhouse was lit on fire when the kids were in class." The preacher immediately leaped from his desk, sprinting to the schoolhouse as fast as his old tired legs would allow. His nostrils filled with smoke as he attempted to enter the building to save as many kids as he could. Just before he entered the building, though, his wife pulled him back and told him that he won't be able to save them. Suddenly, a devious cackling emanated from the schoolhouse, followed by children laughing and singing hymns backward. The malice-filled songs and laughter didn't end until the fire completely devoured the schoolhouse. The rescue workers sent to pick up the remains of the children and Miss Nada heard the same cackling and hymns, even though the school and its inhabitants were long deceased. The remains of the children were buried in a graveyard constructed by the residents of Beth, and Miss Nada's body was encased in cement, left to rot under the burnt-down schoolhouse. Samuel was found stabbed to death in the middle of the forest 2 days after the accident, yet his corpse was months old. And for Miss Nada's students, the only survivor, a boy of 10, revealed that Miss Nada sung lullabies with sinister meanings to the kids, and told them that no one can tell them what to do, except her and Satan. Immediately after, the survivor, who was sick the day of the fire, slit his wrists and wrote, "Back to school" on the wall in blood. Once a person hears Miss Nada's laughter or her children's songs, there's no hope, as they've been asked to become the newest classmate, an unrejectable offer. It all started on July 3rd, 1996, in a calm, peaceful suburban community in Dublin, Ohio. 6 kids, known as the Big Kids Club, rode through their quiet neighborhood on bicycles and heard something that was rarely heard all summer, especially in Dublin. The sound came from a half a mile away, but sounded closer by the way the tune carried itself. This was the only sound that could cause a fat boy to get up from his lazy ass and do something. Something isn't going to chase down the ice cream truck to purchase a chocolate fudge bar, as in some cases greatly preferred by most obese children in Dublin. As parents in their backyards thought they were the first to hear the annoying tune come their way, they were wrong to a full degree. Kids were already up and running to their parents to ask for little loans of change, for an ice cream treat to enjoy and cool off from. It was up to those kids, though, to chase down that truck to make it stop. A boy by the name of Denny Wilson came up running behind the patrol of the Big Kids Club's bicycles. "Calvin! Calvin!" Denny called. "Will you give me a lift on your pegs to the ice cream truck?" Denny said, already climbing on the back of Calvin's red bike. "No!" yelled Calvin. "Get your own bike or run to the truck like what the rest of the kids are doing. Better yet, just go home. Nobody wants you here, and Mom said you were grounded, so beat it, Denny." Calvin was Denny's big brother, and by the way he treated his little brother, you could say he was a sarcastically good role model to Denny. Denny listened anyway, and obeyed his big brother and went on home. As the Big Kids Club rode up beside the ice cream truck, a man the size of a hippopotamus, referring to Cindy's first impression, came up to the truck's countertop and stared deeply at the 6 kids. The Big Kids Club watched suspiciously at the ice cream man as he smoked a lit menthol cigarette. He was an oversized man with a greasy, grimed face and chapped mouth, which blew out grayish-white cloud puffs of tobacco smoke. He had a name tag on the left side of his grease-stained sleeveless shirt. The ice cream man, by the name of Earl Higgins, and Earl did not look so happy with the Big Kids Club staring up at him in his truck. He put out the lit cigarette on the ashtray beside him and took the butt, and flicked it at Carlos, calling him a slur and telling him to go back to Mexico where you belong. He then tried to speak Spanish in his own slurred English tongue and failed, translating the language to nothing but a disfigured gibberish. Earl Higgins looked at Cindy standing by her bike and engaged at her revealed tan skin legs that showed from her wearing purple short shorts. Earl liked what he saw and licked his upper lip, rotating his tongue around his dirty, hairy mustache. "You got yourself a nice set of legs on you, girl. How about you come up in this truck, and good old Earl will teach you how to spread 'em. I'll promise an ice cream for you too, girl. All you have to do is suck my cone, and an amount of vanilla ice cream will shoot out into your mouth. Sound like fun?" Cindy became quickly scared. She got back on her bike and rode behind Calvin, her crush. "Oh boy, don't try to be a hero now. You know about heroes. They save the day, but in the end they always fail to save the girl. Well, at least if you tried to step to me." Calvin got off his bike and walked up to the window. "If you don't shut your mouth and stop what you're doing right now, I'm gonna have my dad beat you up when he comes home from work." Calvin spoke with an angry tone. "Your dad's gonna beat me up? Kid, I'd have you dead before you could even get your ass back on that bike seat to go back home for help. Besides, if I granted you a head start, my truck would still be on your tail." Calvin ran back to his pedal bike and looked at Earl. "You're on, fat ass. Let's race to the end of the creek." Earl ran to the front seat of his truck and turned the key in the ignition to start the truck. "Let's do this then, kid." The race was off. Calvin pedaled at an incredible spontaneous speed towards the end of the creek, which was at the end of their neighborhood block. The ice cream truck was directly behind Calvin, accelerating at a paced procedure, timing itself to when to strike, and pass Calvin, and to leave him in the dust, lost. As Calvin ascended to the neighborhood road, Earl swerved over to the left side of Calvin and entered his riding zone, ordering him to cease pedaling and stomp on the brake pad to stop. When Calvin skid, Earl's ice cream truck was front-angled 5 feet directly ahead of him, and the friction of the bike on the asphalt caused a gravitational pull, forcing Calvin to fly off straight over his handling bars. The speed of the action excluded a controllable stop nowhere but the rear end of the ice cream truck. The impact was almost perfect, as Calvin executed an unwanted dive into the door window of the truck, and landed, and performed a sliding finisher on his face. Broken fragments of glass slit through his facial flesh, lips cut up and ripped, nose split into 3 proportions, started at the bridge, then made a circular ring-like cut, which went down to the right of the nose, and made its way with a slice at the left nostril, and ended when it came back up to the bridge. Earl placed the truck in park and stood up from his seat. Calvin was bleeding gushingly all over the floor. He rose up his face and revealed a muscle surface, doused with bright red blood. Earl looked at Calvin and said no word to him, just looked at his disfeatured face and externally laughed at him suffering from exposed air hitting his meat-resembling face. Calvin mewed like how his little brother Denny did when he failed to impress his father. Calvin was a lot different compared to Denny, though. Calvin always got what he asked for, like receiving 10 times as more gifts than Denny, which Denny only received 2 or 3. His father made sure Calvin was the one playing on the baseball field, while he forced Denny to sit and watch alone in the car, blocks away from the game. Denny was used to the pain and rejection of his father, though. It made him feel happy that someone was actually paying attention to him, and knew that he existed. The Big Kids Club pedaled their way to the back of the ice cream truck. Cindy and Ralph got off their bikes to check inside. Ralph jumped in without fear, and witnessed Calvin being multitudinous stabbed with a knife, and violently eye-gouged with the end of an ice cream scooper. "You like that, boy? Die! Die! Die!" Earl screamed at Calvin's dead body, still stabbing at various times. "Calvin!" Ralph shouted as he gagged, regurgitated, and vomited. Earl walked up to Ralph while he continued to puke and grabbed the door handles. He pulled the doors shut. The doors slammed on Ralph and resulted a broken neck. Earl pulled and twisted his head, and Ralph became close to decapitation once Earl opened the doors. He used the knife as he stabbed through Ralph's neck and sliced through the bone, which had Ralph's head dangled from a strip of peeling flesh like a loose tooth. Once the head was fully off, Ralph's body dropped onto the street in front of Cindy, Donald, Frank, and Nate's feet. They reacted quickly, picked up their bikes, and escaped through the street. The ice cream truck's music chased down the Big Kids Club through the street. Cindy was the leader of the pack now, and she directed their destination to the public eye. Donald had a hard time keeping up with the pack, so he took a shortcut through someone's lawn and ditched his friends. Earl was right behind Cindy, Frank, and Nate. Nate was about to slow down from being tired. He did, and introduced himself to a car's back windshield. The ice cream truck bashed Nate's bike, and he flew through into the glass barrier. He had small pieces of glass shards sticking out of his face. He soon died. Earl had his eyes on Cindy and Frank now. He wanted to kill them so bad that he would gladly do anything else just to have a hand on these kids. His time of luck would soon end. It would end well. As Cindy and Frank skid across the asphalt to stop and yell for nearby help, Earl came driving up. An old woman watering her flowers went and called the police, and neighborhood kids stopped what they were doing and rushed over to Cindy and Frank. "What happened? Huh? Is someone after you or something?" Kids started gathering around and started asking many questions. "Please, someone call 911. Our friends are dead. Do you hear me? My friends are dead," Cindy screamed in tears. "Oh my God, Calvin is dead. He's dead, and I'll never be able to tell him how much I cared for him. It's all ruined." She secretly had a crush on Patrick, and at that very moment she wanted to die. "Cindy, Frank, over here. I found help." Donald came riding through the park grass. He almost wrecked from his stretch marks, which bumped his elbows and altered his pedaling. "Did you get the police?" yelled Frank as he walked a couple feet towards Donald's upcoming. These are the very last words from Donald to Frank before it hit him. "Watch out, Frank!" The exact moment when Donald said those words, Earl came driving up. In his ice cream truck, at an acceleration so deadly that if he had misplaced his steering, he would have flipped. He did not, though, and he struck Frank head on. Frank's head bounced on the pavement like a rock being skipped through a stream of water. He slid 10 feet from the ice cream truck, and his wound left a smeared blood trail behind. Frank was not dead, though. He was still breathing, but the force of the impact provided him with a violent episode of a seizure. His head banged on the pavement as he struggled to outstand the torturing pain. His skull fractured completely, and his brain matter was moderately gashed. Earl's ice cream truck's engine blew, and the coughing smoke blinded Cindy from Earl coming up to her. He grabbed her from the back of the head, and with all of his blunt force he headbutted Cindy, and that caused her to fall down into a state of confusion. She crawled to Frank slowly as Earl watched, and cleaned his knife with a blood-stained rag. Cindy must have been extremely shocked at the collision, because she was on top of Frank with her shirt fully off, caressed on his dead body, and started to kiss the wounded area on his head. She was defiantly crazy after Earl hit her. She made out with Frank as she rubbed her mosquito-sized nipples and licked his blood and brains off the pavement. "Calvin, I love you. I love you so much," Cindy said with a scarlet smile and a face full of blood. She seriously thought Patrick was Frank, as she kept on repeating his name to the sky. "Calvin, Calvin, Calvin," and so on. A shadow entered Cindy's vision, as it soon became to blacken by the color that came out of her. The shadow became sprayed in squirting amounts of blood which came from Cindy's own body. Earl had snuck up behind her to cut her throat, and he succeeded by doing so in front of a crowd of gasping children. As Earl had Cindy's hair wrapped around his fingers, he pushed her head off into the pavement and spotted the last one, Donald. He ran to Donald in a dying sprint, and Donald screamed for his mama to help. His mama heard the scream and came out of the house to witness the scene that would go down as an urban legend, not supposed to be talked about in the present days of Douglin's time. Donald felt an enormous pain into his spine. He knew what it was, but blocked out the reality to wish for another feeling of death for himself. 2 police cruisers came pulling up with their sirens flashed. As the police officers stepped out of their cruisers, they became witnesses to the ice cream for ice cream scene. When they came out to the scene, they noticed a soupy mess of melted ice cream all over the street pavement. Dead bodies of the Big Kids Club laid flat on the ground, which reminded one officer of a homemade ice cream gone completely wrong. It had way too many ingredients that were added to satisfy the already completed flavor. In other words, Earl Higgins went way too far in making his own ordinarily kind of ice cream to be unique. Well, Earl also wanted some toppings for his newly prepared ice cream. He wanted Donald, and he got him when he took the knife and stabbed out bloody syrup, which came out in short, increasing pints. The 2 officers fired a warning shot at Earl, but he seemed to not be fazed by the firing. He just went on and stabbed at Donald in a poured out blood area on the red dude grass. One officer then fired and hit Earl in the jugular, which landed him on his back. He lay there and tried to swing his knife at Donald's escapement, but became rejected when a bullet shot through his temple and killed him. Donald then walked over to his crying mother, almost about to lose consciousness from the excessive blood loss. He made it to his mother's open arms, and he soon died, with his head rested between his mother's loving warmth of breasts. Exactly 10 years later in 2006, a group of kids rode on their bikes to the ice cream truck. Once they came up to the window, they were greeted to the smile of the ice cream man. He was smoking a cigarette as he listened to the kids' conversation of them talking about the urban legend of ice cream for ice cream. At the same present time, Denny Wilson was at the Douglas Cemetery, mourning the deaths of his older brother Calvin Wilson and the Big Kids Club. On the left side of the ice cream man's shirt was a name tag with the signature of Earl Higgins. The smile on his face grew larger when a small girl from the group of kids came up to his window. Thanks for listening, guys, and if you want more creepypasta horror stories, or any other horror stories, comment below. Also, if you like demonic killers, check out Horror Stories of Demons and Devils right here.